What do you do when the life you carefully planned refuses to cooperate? I'm not talking about minor inconveniences. I'm talking about the moments that shake your confidence at the core. The promotion you were certain was yours goes to someone else. The relationship you invested years into collapses in a single conversation. The opportunity you prayed for, worked toward, sacrificed for, disappears without explanation. In those moments, it doesn't just feel like something didn't go your way. It feels like life itself betrayed your expectations. And here's the uncomfortable truth that sits at the heart of John C. Maxwell's "When Things Do Go Your Way." You are not defined by what happens to you, you are defined by how you respond when it does. That sounds simple, almost cliché, until it's your turn. Maxwell doesn't write this book from theory alone. He writes from decades of leadership coaching, from mentoring executives, entrepreneurs, pastors, and high performers who all had something in common. At some point, things didn't go according to plan. And instead of pretending adversity is rare, he makes something clear right away. Adversity is not an exception to the path. It is the path. One of the strongest foundations in this book is the idea that most people carry an unrealistic expectation about success. We subconsciously believe that if we work hard, stay disciplined, treat people well, and remain consistent, life should reward us in a linear way. Effort in, results out. Cause and effect. Straight line upward. But life doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in curves, detours, and sometimes complete reversals. Maxwell argues that the gap between expectation and reality is where discouragement is born. The pain isn't just from the setback itself. It's from the story we told ourselves about how things were supposed to unfold. And this is where the first major shift happens. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Maxwell suggests we learn to ask, "What is this trying to grow in me?" That single shift moves you from victim to leader. Throughout the book, Maxwell emphasizes that leadership is not about position. It's about personal responsibility. And nowhere is responsibility more visible than in how we handle disappointment. Anyone can lead when everything is working. It takes maturity to lead yourself when nothing is. He introduces the idea that adversity reveals, not creates, your character. Pressure doesn't magically manufacture strength. It exposes what's already there. If you're resilient, pressure magnifies it. If you're insecure, pressure magnifies that too. If you lack discipline, adversity will highlight it in bold letters. That realization can feel heavy, because it means setbacks aren't just external events. They're mirrors, but Maxwell doesn't leave you in that discomfort. He provides structure. One of the core frameworks in the book revolves around perspective. He argues that perspective is the difference between seeing a setback as a dead end or as a detour. And detours, while frustrating, often lead to places you would never have discovered on your original route. He shares stories from his own career, moments when speaking engagements fell through, when plans unraveled, when leadership transitions didn't go smoothly. Instead of collapsing under those moments, he made a deliberate choice to believe that what he could not control externally, he could still control internally. That belief is power. Another key principle Maxwell explores is emotional resilience. He explains that when things don't go your way, your first response is usually emotional, not rational. Frustration, anger, fear, self-doubt. And those emotions aren't wrong, they're human, but staying in them is optional. He talks about the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate and emotional. Responding is thoughtful and intentional. The space between stimulus and response is where growth lives. When something goes wrong, most people move quickly to blame the economy, their boss, the timing, other people's decisions. But blame gives away power. Responsibility gives it back. Maxwell doesn't suggest that every setback is your fault. He suggests that every response is your choice, and that distinction changes everything. He also addresses discouragement with precision. Discouragement is more dangerous than failure because failure is an event, but discouragement is a mindset. Failure happens once. Discouragement lingers. It whispers that maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you should lower your expectations. Maybe this is your limit. Maxwell explains that discouragement shrinks vision, and once your vision shrinks, your actions shrink with it. So how do you combat that? You anchor yourself in purpose. The book repeatedly emphasizes that when you know your why, temporary obstacles lose their power to define you. Purpose stabilizes you when outcomes fluctuate. If your identity is tied only to results, then setbacks will shatter you. But if your identity is tied to growth and calling, then setbacks refine you. Maxwell also challenges the idea that success is about avoiding problems. Instead, he suggests success is about solving problems. The higher you go in leadership, the more complex the problems become. So adversity is not proof that you're failing. Often, it's proof that you're advancing. That reframing is critical. He encourages readers to develop what he calls a growth response, a disciplined way of thinking that asks constructive questions. Instead of why me, ask what can I learn? Instead of who's to blame, ask what's my next step? Instead of why is this unfair, ask how can this make me better? Those questions are practical. They move you forward. Maxwell also weaves in the role of faith and trust, not in a vague, abstract way, but in a grounding way. He speaks about trusting that there is purpose even when there is no clarity, that sometimes the delay is protection, that sometimes the rejection is redirection, sometimes the closed door is preparation for a larger room. Even if you approach this from a purely practical standpoint, the principle remains powerful. You don't have to fully understand the setback to benefit from it. One of the most compelling themes in the book is patience. In a culture that celebrates speed and immediate results, patience feels outdated. But Maxwell argues that growth has a timeline. Just because something isn't happening now doesn't mean it's not happening at all. Roots grow before branches. Character builds before recognition. He warns against quitting too early. Many people abandon their path not because they lack talent, but because they lack endurance. And endurance is forged in seasons where things don't go your way. There's also a strong emphasis on community. Maxwell reminds readers that you don't have to navigate adversity alone. The right people provide perspective when your vision narrows. They remind you of who you are when discouragement tries to redefine you. Isolation intensifies setbacks. Connection stabilizes them. As the book progresses, the message becomes clear. Adversity is not an interruption to your story. It is part of your formation. Think about your own life for a moment, the skills you're proud of, the maturity you carry, the strength you rely on. How much of that was built in comfort? Probably very little. Most growth is born in discomfort. Most confidence is built after doubt. Most clarity emerges after confusion. And that brings us back to the question we opened with. What do you do when life doesn't go your way? Maxwell's answer isn't flashy. It's disciplined. You control what you can. You grow where you are. You refuse to let temporary outcomes define permanent identity. You stay faithful to the process. You choose perspective daily, not once. He makes it clear that you may not control the storm, but you absolutely control how you steer the boat. And sometimes steering means slowing down. Sometimes it means recalibrating. Sometimes it means learning a lesson you didn't want to learn. But it never means surrendering your growth. The most powerful shift in this entire book is understanding that adversity is not proof that you're off track. Sometimes it is proof that you are being strengthened for something greater than you imagined. And here's the deeper truth that closes the loop. Every single person watching this will face moments when things don't go their way. That is guaranteed. The variable is not the setback. The variable is the response. You can get bitter and allow disappointment to harden you. You can get stuck and allow fear to freeze you. Or you can get better and allow adversity to build you. That choice won't announce itself dramatically. It will show up quietly in your daily decisions, in whether you keep showing up, in whether you keep learning, in whether you allow one moment to rewrite your entire narrative. When things don't go your way, that's not the end of your story. It's the moment your character steps forward. It's the moment leadership becomes personal. It's the moment growth becomes intentional. And maybe, just maybe, the life you are meant to build requires the very detour you're resisting right now. Because in the end, it's not about avoiding adversity. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle it. That's the message of this book. And the next time life refuses to follow your script, remember this. The setback is real, the disappointment is real, the frustration is real, but so is your ability to rise above it. When things don't go your way, that is not the moment you lose. That is the moment you decide who you are becoming. And that decision, who you are becoming, is rarely made in one dramatic, cinematic moment. It's made in the quiet hours after the disappointment. It's made the morning after the rejection email. It's made when no one is clapping, no one is validating you, and no one even sees the internal battle you're fighting. Maxwell makes it clear that resilience is not loud. It's not flashy. It's not performative. It is deeply personal. It is the private discipline of choosing growth over grievance. One of the most practical insights he shares is the idea that adversity forces you to clarify what truly matters. When everything is going well, you can afford distractions. You can afford ego. You can afford shallow motivations. But when things fall apart, you quickly discover what your foundation is built on. If your identity is rooted in titles, applause, income, or approval, then adversity will shake you to your core. But if your identity is rooted in values, purpose, and character, then even when circumstances shift, you remain steady. The storm may move your environment, but it doesn't move your center. Maxwell challenges readers to examine their expectations. Many of us don't consciously admit it, but we believe that good behavior guarantees good outcomes. We believe that integrity ensures immediate reward. We believe that effort guarantees recognition. And while those principles matter, life doesn't always reward you on your timeline. Sometimes you do everything right and still face loss. Sometimes you make the best decision available and still experience consequences you didn't anticipate. The maturity Maxwell points toward is the ability to stay committed to your values, even when the results are delayed. He also emphasizes adaptability. When things don't go your way, you have two options: cling to the original plan or adjust the strategy. Clinging feels safe because it preserves your pride. Adjusting requires humility because it forces you to admit that the path has changed. But adaptability is not weakness. It is wisdom in motion. The most successful leaders Maxwell has coached are not those who never faced disruption. They are the ones who pivoted without losing their purpose. They understood that while the vision might stay constant, the method might need revision. There is also a deep exploration of responsibility without self-condemnation. This is important because many people swing to extremes. Either they blame everyone else for their setbacks, or they blame themselves for everything. Maxwell proposes a balanced approach. Own what is yours to own, learn from it, and release what is outside your control. Carrying guilt for things you could not control is just as unproductive as denying responsibility for things you could. Growth happens in the middle, where accountability meets self-compassion. Another powerful theme in the book is endurance. Not excitement, not talent, not even intelligence. Endurance. The willingness to continue when momentum slows. The willingness to keep preparing when opportunities pause. The willingness to stay disciplined when the spotlight fades. Maxwell argues that many people overestimate what they can accomplish in a short period and underestimate what they can accomplish over a long period if they refuse to quit. Adversity stretches your timeline. It tests whether your commitment is emotional or intentional. He also discusses emotional maturity in leadership. When things don't go your way, your reaction impacts more than just you. If you're a parent, your children are watching. If you're a manager, your team is observing. If you're building something, your partners are paying attention. Your response teaches others how to handle difficulty. That means adversity is not just personal training, it's public modeling. The way you handle loss, disappointment, and delay becomes part of your influence. Maxwell shares stories of leaders who faced bankruptcy, betrayal, public criticism, and personal failure. The common thread wasn't that they avoided pain. It was that they refused to let pain define their trajectory. They asked better questions. They sought wise counsel. They adjusted their strategy. And most importantly, they stayed anchored in purpose. Their setbacks became classrooms rather than prisons. There's a section of the book that quietly addresses something many people don't talk about: fear of trying again. After something doesn't go your way, especially if it hurts deeply, there is a temptation to play smaller, to lower the risk, to protect yourself. Maxwell acknowledges that instinct but warns against building a life around avoidance. Safety can quickly become stagnation. The key is not to eliminate fear, but to move forward despite it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that growth matters more than comfort. He also highlights gratitude as a stabilizing force. This might sound simple, but it's transformative. When adversity narrows your focus, gratitude widens it again. It reminds you that one disappointment does not cancel every blessing. One closed door does not erase every open one. Gratitude doesn't deny pain, it balances perspective. And perspective is everything in seasons of disruption. As the message deepens, Maxwell circles back to faith, the trust that your story is bigger than a single chapter. Even if you're not approaching this from a spiritual lens, the principle holds. Your life cannot be defined by one moment unless you allow it to be. When things don't go your way, you are standing in a chapter, not the conclusion. Chapters end. Stories continue. He encourages readers to see adversity as training for future capacity. The patience you build now prepares you for greater responsibility later. The humility you learn now prepares you for influence later. The resilience you cultivate now prepares you for impact later. Nothing is wasted unless you refuse to learn from it. And that brings a powerful realization. The setback you're experiencing may not be about what you lost. It may be about who you are becoming. Think about that carefully. If everything had gone exactly according to your original plan, would you have developed the same strength, the same empathy, the same adaptability? Sometimes the very thing you wish hadn't happened is the thing that shapes you into someone capable of handling what's ahead. Maxwell doesn't romanticize pain. He doesn't pretend adversity feels good, but he does insist that it can be good for you if you let it shape rather than shrink you. So when you find yourself in a season where things are not unfolding as expected, pause before labeling it as failure. It might be formation. Pause before assuming it's the end. It might be preparation. Pause before deciding you're not capable. You might simply be in the middle of becoming stronger than you've ever been. And here, where everything connects back to the beginning. You cannot always control what happens to you. You cannot control timing, other people's decisions, economic shifts, or unexpected losses. But you can control your posture. You can control your mindset. You can control whether you use adversity as an excuse or as fuel. When things don't go your way, life hands you a choice that no one else can make for you. That choice doesn't come with applause. It doesn't come with recognition. It comes quietly, internally, in the form of a question. Who will you be now? Will you allow disappointment to harden your heart? Will you allow delay to diminish your vision? Or will you allow difficulty to deepen your character? Because at the end of the day, the goal is not to build a life where nothing ever goes wrong. That life doesn't exist. The goal is to become the kind of person who can stand firm when it does. And if you can do that, if you can stay grounded in purpose, disciplined in response, open to learning, willing to adapt, and committed to growth, then even when things don't go your way, they will still work in your favor. Not because they were easy, not because they were fair, but because you refuse to let them define your limits. That is the heartbeat of this message. And long after the setback fades, the person you became because of it will remain. And that lasting change in who you become, that's the real win. Outcomes shift, circumstances rotate, opportunities come and go, but character compounds. The strength you build in one difficult season becomes the stability you stand on in the next. Maxwell makes it clear that adversity is cumulative in its benefits if you respond to it correctly. Every time you choose growth over bitterness, you are stacking resilience. Every time you choose responsibility over blame, you are strengthening leadership. And leadership at its core begins with self-leadership. There is a moment in every setback where the external problem is no longer the biggest issue, your internal narrative is. The story you start telling yourself becomes the steering wheel of your future. If you tell yourself, "This always happens to me," you begin to expect defeat. If you tell yourself, "I'm just not cut out for this," you begin to shrink your ambition. But if you tell yourself, "This is part of my training," everything shifts. The event hasn't changed. The interpretation has. And interpretation determines direction. Maxwell urges readers to guard their internal dialogue carefully. Words shape belief, and belief shapes behavior. If you repeatedly rehearse discouragement in your mind, your actions will follow that script. But if you intentionally rehearse possibility, learning, and growth, your behavior aligns with progress. This is not denial. It's discipline. It's choosing to align your thoughts with where you're going instead of where you stumbled. Another layer the book explores is timing. Sometimes when things don't go your way, it's not because you're unqualified. It's because you're early, or you're being refined, or you're being redirected towards something that requires a slightly different version of you. Maxwell emphasizes that readiness matters more than speed. The world often celebrates overnight success, but rarely do we see the years of unseen preparation behind it. When doors remain closed, it doesn't always mean no. Sometimes it means not yet. And not yet can be a powerful space of development if you treat it that way. He also talks about consistency in small actions. Big adversity tempts you to make big emotional decisions, but sustainable growth often happens in small, repeated disciplines. Showing up anyway, learning anyway, improving anyway, maintaining integrity anyway. When things don't go your way, the most powerful response is not dramatic reinvention, it's steady refinement. Quietly getting better while others assume you've stalled. There's something incredibly mature about that approach. It means you don't allow circumstances to dictate your standards. You don't allow disappointment to lower your work ethic. You don't allow rejection to reduce your preparation. Instead, you double down on becoming the kind of person who will be ready when opportunity aligns with timing. Maxwell also addresses the relational dimension of adversity. Difficult seasons reveal who is truly in your corner. They expose shallow connections and strengthen meaningful ones. Instead of resenting that exposure, he suggests appreciating the clarity. Not everyone is meant to walk every season with you. Some people are present for convenience. Others are present for commitment. When things don't go your way, you discover the difference. And then there's the issue of comparison. In moments of setback, it's tempting to look sideways, to scroll through other people's wins, to measure your stalled season against someone else's highlight reel. Maxwell cautions against this trap. Comparison distorts reality. It makes your journey feel smaller and someone else's feel smoother than it truly is. Every person faces adversity, you just don't always see it. Staying focused on your path protects your energy and your clarity. One of the most powerful undercurrents of this book is ownership of growth. No one can grow for you. Mentors can guide you. Friends can encourage you. Leaders can inspire you. But the internal decision to mature belongs to you alone. When things don't go your way, the temptation is to wait for better circumstances, better support, better opportunities. But growth rarely waits for ideal conditions. It begins where you are, with what you have. Maxwell reinforces that progress is rarely visible in the beginning. Just like physical training, you don't see dramatic change after one session, but consistency compounds. The same applies to emotional and leadership growth. Each disciplined response to adversity strengthens you incrementally, and over time, those increments transform you. Eventually, something shifts. The same kind of setback that once would have shaken you deeply now feels manageable. The same criticism that once would have discouraged you now feels constructive. The same delay that once would have frustrated you now feels strategic. That's growth in action. You don't just survive adversity, you outgrow its power over you. And that's when you realize something profound. The goal was never to eliminate difficulty. The goal was to elevate your capacity. When your capacity increases, challenges that once felt overwhelming become stepping stones. Problems that once stopped you become puzzles you can solve. Disappointments that once defined you become stories you can share to help someone else. Because here's the final layer Maxwell points toward: your adversity is not just for you. The wisdom you gain, the patience you develop, the resilience you cultivate, those qualities position you to guide others through their own seasons of disappointment. Leadership multiplies through shared experience, and the credibility you earn by walking through difficulty with integrity becomes influence that no title can grant. So when things don't go your way, you are standing at a crossroads that is far more significant than it appears. You are not just choosing how to handle a moment. You are shaping the trajectory of your character. You are deciding the standard of your leadership. You are determining whether this chapter will shrink you or strengthen you. And long after the specifics of this setback fade from memory, the strength you built in response to it will remain embedded in who you are. That's the real message here. Life will not always follow your blueprint. Plans will shift. Expectations will be tested. Doors will close. But none of those events have the authority to define you unless you surrender that authority. When things don't go your way, you have more power than you think. The power to learn, the power to adapt, the power to persevere, the power to trust the process even when you cannot see the outcome. And if you can hold on to that, if you can respond with intention instead of impulse, growth instead of grievance, discipline instead of defeat, then one day you will look back at the very season that once frustrated you and recognize it as the turning point that shaped you. Not because it was easy, not because it was comfortable, but because you chose to become stronger through it. And that choice, repeated consistently, is what transforms setbacks into stepping stones and transforms you into someone capable of far more than you imagined when everything first fell apart. And at some point, if you stay in the process long enough, you begin to notice something subtle but powerful. The fear that once controlled you starts losing its grip. The uncertainty that once kept you awake at night becomes something you can sit with calmly. The unpredictability of life doesn't disappear, but your reaction to it changes. And that shift is evidence of growth that cannot be taken from you. Maxwell's message ultimately pushes you toward emotional steadiness. Not emotional suppression, steadiness. The ability to feel disappointment without being destroyed by it. The ability to acknowledge frustration without letting it dictate your decisions. The ability to grieve what didn't happen while still believing in what can. That level of maturity is rare, but it is built, not born. And it is almost always built in seasons when things don't go your way. There's also an important realization that comes with time. Sometimes the outcome you fought for wasn't actually aligned with who you were becoming. Sometimes you were chasing something that fit an older version of you. And when it fell apart, it felt like loss, but in reality, it was alignment. Growth often changes your desires before it changes your circumstances. And when you look back, you realize that what you once called disappointment was actually redirection towards something more fitting. Another layer of the book challenges the idea of control. Many of us equate control with security. If we can predict it, manage it, and plan it, we feel safe. But life doesn't always cooperate with our need for certainty. Maxwell encourages readers to shift from control to trust. Trust in their preparation, trust in their values, trust in the process of growth. When you stop obsessing over controlling outcomes and start focusing on controlling effort and attitude, peace increases even when circumstances remain unstable. And that peace is powerful, because when you are not consumed by panic or resentment, you think more clearly, you make wiser decisions, you maintain healthier relationships. Adversity handled poorly compounds damage. Adversity handled wisely compounds strength. Eventually, you begin to see adversity differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this developing in me?" That shift transforms difficulty from something you endure to something you engage with intentionally. You become proactive in your growth rather than reactive to your circumstances. Maxwell also emphasizes the long game. Life is not a single event. It is a series of seasons. Some seasons are marked by acceleration. Others are marked by refinement. If you judge your entire life based on one difficult stretch, you lose perspective. But when you zoom out, you recognize that no single setback has the authority to define your entire story. That long-term perspective protects you from making short-term emotional decisions. It keeps you from quitting prematurely. It reminds you that success is not determined by one opportunity, but by sustained character over time. And perhaps one of the most empowering truths woven throughout the book is this: you are more resilient than you think. Often, the only way to discover your capacity is to be stretched beyond what feels comfortable. Strength is not revealed in ease. It is revealed in endurance. When everything is smooth, you operate within known limits. When things fall apart, you are forced to expand. You discover patience you didn't know you had, creativity you didn't know you possessed, determination you didn't know was possible. Adversity introduces you to a stronger version of yourself. And that's the paradox. The very experiences you would never volunteer for often become the experiences that shape you most profoundly. As this message comes full circle, remember where we started. What do you do when life doesn't go the way you planned? That question is not theoretical. It is personal. It is immediate. It is something every person will face in different forms and different intensities. You may not control the economy. You may not control other people's decisions. You may not control unexpected losses or sudden changes, but you control your response. You control your perspective. You control whether this moment becomes a breaking point or a building point. And one day, not immediately, not overnight, but one day, you will look back at the season that once felt like an obstacle and recognize it as a catalyst. You will see how it forced you to mature, how it deepened your faith, how it strengthened your discipline, how it clarified your purpose, how it refined your character. When things don't go your way, you are not being singled out. You are being shaped, and shaping takes pressure. It takes friction. It takes time. But if you lean into it instead of resisting it, if you choose growth instead of grievance, if you decide that no setback will have the final word over your identity, then you don't just survive adversity, you leverage it. You turn it into wisdom. You turn it into strength. You turn it into leadership. And ultimately, you turn it into a foundation that cannot be shaken by temporary outcomes. So the next time life refuses to follow your script, remember this. The plan may have changed, but your potential has not. The door may have closed, but your development continues. The path may look different, but your purpose is still intact. When things don't go your way, that is not the end of your story. It is the moment you rise, steady yourself, and step forward, stronger, wiser, and more prepared than ever before.